This is the first module of MCDB 3010, Teaching and Course-Based Undergraduate Research Experiences. Over the past 6 years, undergraduate students leaving the Python project, MCDB 4202, requested opportunities to continue their involvement in the course. We met this need through informal participation. Former students returned to deliver short lectures, to assist during challenging experiments, and to evaluate the final poster session. To formalize involvement in spring 2016, 4 students repeated the course for credit to continue their research, and 2 registered as independent study students. The independent study students received training in delivering effective lectures, assisted with lab preparation, performed experiments to help advance the students' research, and developed a survey to assess the outcomes of incorporating technology in the course. We observed positive interactions between these teaching assistants and the students. Additionally, students who continued their research independently provided in-class tutoring for students who were struggling. This structure more closely resembled the real research lab, where members have varying levels of experience and expertise. To formally provide students with an opportunity to continue their involvement in 4202, as well as in the lower division course-based undergraduate research experiences, we developed a course that allows undergraduates who took these cures to teach and mentor currently enrolled students. The Undergraduate Teaching Assistant TA Training course, MCDB 3010, provides this opportunity along with formal training in science education and mentorship. We've formulated the following learning goals for this course. 1, to enhance existing understanding of genetics and molecular biology through increased responsibility in cures. 2, to improve the students' presentation skills and confidence in public speaking. 3, to develop peer mentoring skills. 4, to develop intellectual flexibility required to address. And 5, to develop an understanding of effective teaching strategies and the theories behind those strategies. There are many benefits to engaging in teaching. In addition to the known benefits, receiving credit or a stipend for participating, for example, it can be an incredibly rewarding experience that contributes to the education of fellow students and teaches you about how you learn. Some additional benefits are becoming a better student. By considering how other people learn and best teaching practices, you will examine the methods that work best for you as well. 2, to gain experience with public speaking. Do you have a fear of public speaking, even in a small group? Teaching prepares you to deliver a well-organized, practiced talk and gives you plenty of opportunity to gain confidence in conveying information in an efficient, effective manner. 3, relearn the basics. Teaching provides you with an opportunity to revisit concepts that you may have learned years ago in introductory courses. This information provides the basis for more complex concepts that you'll encounter in more advanced classes and will prepare you for admissions examinations for medical and graduate school. 4, build your resume. With teaching on your resume, you communicate a high level of expertise to potential employers or postgraduate programs. 5, make a difference to students. Teaching assistants can often be more accessible than professors, and students find teaching assistants to be more approachable. You can make a huge difference in what your students learn. 6, contribute to student retention in science. Up to 40% of students who are interested in pursuing science majors when entering college change their mind during the course of their undergraduate education. This occurs mostly during their first year of science curriculum. It's thought that a lack of personal attention and mentorship is one of the causes of this attrition. As a TA, you get to know these students and encourage them to remain in the sciences. Research-based labs attract a variety of students. We've seen freshmen and sophomores who are interested in meeting the MCDB lab requirements, post-baccalaureate students who are returning to school for a career change, and juniors and seniors who have recently changed majors. The group is expected to become less diverse in terms of academic age, and more diverse in terms of level of investment as the number of sections expands to include all MCDB majors. This creates unique challenges to the instructors and TAs. One of the goals of MCDB 3010 is to prepare you as a TA to confront these challenges and to open your eyes to what it's like to be on the other side of the desk. In Reading 1, you'll see frequently asked questions that are not covered here. You should read through these for general information about the expectations of a teaching assistant. Fairness is more complicated than is usually imagined. Students are very attuned to which of their colleagues seem to get more attention from their TAs. There have been cases where some students felt select students have been given an unfair advantage by a TA. Sometimes there is a fine line between trying to help a particularly assertive or needy student and giving that student an unfair advantage over others in securing a better grade on a test or other assignment. There are some students who will unscrupulously take advantage of a TA by trying to ingratiate themselves in an effort to do well in the course, while there are others who are simply more compulsive about taking every legitimate advantage to learn. And there are those who have a serious academic problem and turn to TAs desperately needing help. No matter what the circumstances, TAs must be careful to treat students in a consistent and fair manner. Doing so means being fair to students in the course or section who are not overtly seeking the TA's aid. The same help and information that is offered to one student should be offered to all. Being open about what type of help is available and keeping relationships with students professional go a long way in establishing an atmosphere of fairness. This is one of the most important reasons why becoming friends with students who are under your instruction is not a good idea. Students who become your social friends may inadvertently learn more than they should about what will be on the test, and even when that is not the case, other students in the course may assume that a TA's student friends are getting more information just because of what appears to be a close relationship. The challenge facing all people in education is to communicate with each other in a manner that does not reduce people to an inferior status or ostracize them because of age, color, gender, sexual orientation, religion, race, disability, or national origin. Continuous use of the pronoun he in a context applicable to both sexes, for example, excludes women. The reverse is, of course, also true. Racial slurs of any sort are self-serving attempts to belittle and relegate individuals or groups to a position of inferiority. More subtle forms of communication in a classroom setting, such as which students are called on, also form a classroom culture which may either promote or detract from an inclusive environment. It is not always easy to be sure which terms are or are not acceptable. Although terminology may change over time, racial slurs or derogatory comments about ethnicity are never acceptable. Neither are jokes that center on race, gender, sexual orientation, national origin, religion, social status, or disability. When functioning as a TA, it is important to consider the connotation of the language you use. The deliberate act of thinking sensitively about what words and examples you use in class is an important first step in effective, non-discriminatory, inclusive discourse. Sometimes, despite all efforts, a remark, example, or action may offend. If students feel comfortable enough in a classroom, they will say why they are offended, and the incident becomes a learning situation for all. Be willing to listen to students who are worried or offended by a comment and be appreciative of their sensitivity. Furthermore, texts and articles that have important value often contain excluding or questionable words. Be sure to point out to your students any language that you find problematic in resources you use, and use that as a teaching opportunity to discuss the implications of the language. Students at University of Colorado Boulder come from a variety of ethnic, religious, linguistic, and economic backgrounds. In order to do your job well, you must be sensitive to the varied backgrounds and needs of these students. Here are some suggestions on how to create a welcoming and safe environment for learning. Consider mature students. Most mature students have sacrificed a lot to be in school and are therefore very conscious of risking failure. This fear of failure or embarrassment may mean that these students will be reluctant to speak in class, or that they will undergo a great deal of stress over their academic performance. They might have difficulty with being corrected, especially if their TA is considerably younger than they are. Bear this in mind when making comments, written or oral, and try to be tactful. Years of absence from school can lead some mature students to have inefficient study habits or unrealistic expectations of their capacities. Where a younger student may need to be reminded to take practice into account, older students may need to be steered in another direction. Mature students can easily feel marginalized from the rest of the student body. TAs should be extra careful not to encourage this through classroom dynamics. Many mature students have work or family-related demands and stresses that need to be taken into account. Consider international students. Language often acts as a barrier for students from other cultures or languages, either because they are conscious of their accents or dialects, or because they are sometimes unable to find the right words when under pressure. Take the time to listen carefully to what all of your students are trying to say. Rephrase a question or response may prove helpful, but try not to pressure your students when they are speaking. Some international students may be from a culture in which education is more authoritarian, or where public dissent and debate are not encouraged. Creating an open and supportive environment in your classes will go a long way toward dealing with this problem. Encourage international and ESL, or English as a Second Language, students to speak in class, but do not push too hard. Sometimes the words we use, the speed at which we speak, or the culturally based examples we use will prevent international students from understanding what we're saying. A puzzled or bored look may be a sign that there is a problem with comprehension. New terminology should always be written on the board and defined, and difficult concepts should be explained as graphically and concretely as possible. Colloquialisms and irony may be inefficient when communicating ideas that we want the students to understand exactly. Address your explanations and clarifications to all students in the class, not just international students. Many international and ESL students will benefit from opportunities to submit drafts of essays for preliminary comment and advice. Students may be embarrassed to admit the difficulties of comprehension, so you might need to approach them outside of class in a sensitive and personable way to ensure that they understand the material. If international students are looking for additional personal or academic support, you could refer them to CU Boulder International Student Support. English language resources, including written consultations, conversation hours, and tutoring are available. Remember to think of the person before the disability. Special needs students are differently abled, but they're intelligent, capable first and foremost. Students with vision impairment, motor coordination difficulties, and hearing impairments may require note takers, copies of presentations, and class notes. If this is the case, students should have contacted CU Boulder Disability Services to obtain a form that describes the issues. If you receive a form, give it to the instructor so immediate accommodations can be made for the student. Do not accept any forms by email. Anyone could inadvertently fall into behavior in the classroom that is not gender inclusive. While women may be more sensitive to the concerns of female students, this is not always the case. Deeply rooted patterns of behavior toward women in our society can lead any of us to marginalize the classroom contributions of female students. Subtleties such as using a distinct tone of voice or different mannerisms with female students can have the effect of discouraging women from achieving their full potential. For example, studies have shown that female students are more frequently interrupted when speaking, and instructors make more eye contact with male students. The implication for a woman is that her contribution is less important than those of male students. Female students and instructors are more often judged according to appearance rather than accomplishments, and women's successes, rather than being attributed to intelligence, are more often seen as the result of diligence or luck. This degrades the academic struggles of women and inhibits them from striving to do their best. While a person is not wholly defined by sexual orientation, it is a major component of one's life. Creating a comfortable environment for students may reduce some emotional barriers to learning. There are some things that you can do as a TA to contribute to the development of a welcoming learning environment for all students. Remember that you often do not know what the sexual orientations of your students are or coworkers are. Never presume someone's sexual orientation. Do not make assumptions. As with mature students, on occasion, these stresses may need to be taken into account. Use gender-inclusive language, such as partner or spouse. Encourage students equally to pursue their interests beyond the limits of the traditional fields. In general, never make assumptions about a student's background or ability. Encourage students to voice different views or perspectives freely, and furthermore, give these views consideration and support where possible. Do not tolerate the use of language that discriminates against anyone. Build trust with your students. The importance of trust in the student-teacher relationship cannot be overemphasized. Two components of trustworthiness are teacher credibility and teacher authenticity. Do not deny your credibility. It is important to acknowledge your students' ideas, experiences, and abilities. However, be careful not to undermine your own credibility. Be confident that you have earned your position as a TA, and adhere to the following tips. Make sure your words and actions are congruent. Avoid saying one thing and doing another, or espousing principles that you do not believe in or put into practice. Be ready to admit your errors. Such admissions will help reduce the tension that students feel about their own need to be seen as perfect by their peers and teachers. Reveal aspects of yourself unrelated to teaching. When you reveal aspects of yourself that do not relate to your teaching role, it makes you appear more human to your students. Show that you take your students seriously. Listen carefully to any concerns, anxieties, or problems voiced by your students. Arrange opportunities and provide encouragement for students to speak out about what is on their minds. Never leave an issue unresolved. Do not play favorites. Playing favorites quickly destroys your teacher credibility. Avoid showing preference through verbal and nonverbal cues. And realize the power of your own role modeling. Acknowledge the symbolic significance of your actions and ensure that these actions are perceived as authentic by your students. It is extremely important to realize that teachers cannot interact with students in the same way they would interact with friends or colleagues in other settings. You will be close in age or even younger than the students in your class, and you may live in close proximity to them. The teacher-student relationship is professional and formal, generally not personal or informal. It exists in an environment that is purposefully diverse. Students of all backgrounds and circumstances have a right to be treated with respect and to be evaluated in accordance with the prevailing norms in your discipline. This means that teachers must be both dedicated to their students and professionally detached, sufficiently detached anyway, to be able to carry out one's responsibilities in a manner that is consistent with the highest standards of professional ethics. Part of respecting your students is getting to know them. Respecting students means making every effort to get to know them as students. What are their names? What are their strengths and weaknesses as they relate to their abilities to master the course material? And what kind of individualized assistance will best help them be successful? The lab is no place for certain forms of sarcasm, incautious statements, or playful comments that are inconsistent with your position of authority and your professional responsibilities. One of the more egregious mistakes in this regard involves behavior or commentary that is responsibly viewed as forms of sexual harassment. Obviously, purposeful harassment is inexcusable, but also be careful to consider whether comments that you believe to be innocent, such as complimenting one's appearance, are inconsistent with the responsibilities of your position. You encounter these students because you have a job to do. Focus your demeanor on that goal. It's tempting for TAs to try to win students over by making friends or acting as a friend. In part, this is due to the natural inclination of teachers to want to be liked by students, and being friendly is an obvious element of that strategy. The temptation also arises in cases where teaching assistants feel as though they're part of the same peer group as undergraduates, or at least not far removed. It's not uncommon to think that, in other settings, many of one's students could instead be one's friends. It's important to maintain a sharp distinction between being a friendly professional and treating students like your friend. The teacher-student relationship is, inevitably, a structure of authority and includes an evaluative component that absolutely requires a teacher to be able to offer fair, objective assessments of students' work. One's position as a TA is dramatically undermined when one sacrifices professional detachment for a more personal and informal relationship. And students quickly lose respect for instructors who seem more interested in making friends than doing their jobs. It's never okay to go out with students. Research laboratories may provide the first opportunity for students to experience failure in a course. Many students who are drawn to research are highly motivated students who are accustomed to following the rules, meeting expectations, and achieving high grades on assignments because they were done right. Engaging in research will be very different and challenging for many of them. Students may follow all of the instructions perfectly but have a failed experiment. They may work hard but not get any positive results. In research-based labs, frequent lab meetings are necessary to review data and, importantly, to improve morale. During this semester, you will notice slumps where students have low energy and feel defeated by their research process. As a TA, you should encourage the students to be persistent and patient. You'll need to be the cheerleader for the group at times and focus on the positive outcomes, even if they occur weeks before. 1. Tell students that failure is common. Provide examples from your own laboratory experiments. Failure in terms of not getting a positive result does not necessarily mean that anything was done wrong. Much of the work that we do in research-based labs is based on luck. You should emphasize that good technique is required for an experiment to work, but it's not sufficient to obtain results. Getting good results is due to a number of factors, including a well-thought-out experiment, good technique, proper interpretation and reporting of data, and a little bit of luck. Remind students that failing to identify a hit or get a good result does not mean that they're failing the course. Many students in research-based courses fear a low grade as a result of not getting good results. This can unfortunately produce a situation that makes falsification of data tempting. Emphasize that even the smallest falsification is not permitted. Encourage students to discuss the details of the experiment as a group. They can be amazing sources of ideas for improving experimental design. Even small changes may improve results, but do not allow individual students to change the way they perform the experiment. Everyone must perform the same procedure, but no more than one aspect of the experiment should be changed at a time. And finally, celebrate milestones. Did the student get their first hit or good result? Did someone generate their first gene expression data? Announce it in class. Remind the students that individual results contribute to the success of the class as a whole. Prior to your first class, visit the room. Inspect for future planning, furniture arrangement, electrical outlets, chalkboards or whiteboards, lights and equipment. Have shortcomings corrected if possible. If you want to achieve an informal style, arrive early for the first class and get to know the students. Introduce yourself. Tell the students something about yourself to break the ice, where you are from, your professional background, or the degree that you're working on. You can ask your students for information you want or need. Have you taken any previous related courses? What did they intend to get out of the course? Explain course structure, including the syllabus, how it relates to overall course objectives, how the tutorial or course fits into the overall curriculum, and what you expect of students. This can be achieved on one of the first slides of your presentation. Tell why you're excited about the course or the subject. Enthusiasm can be contagious. If you're nervous facing class for the first time, accept that it's okay and normal to feel that way. Mentally step out of your space for a moment. Look at the area in which you're about to work and look at yourself in it. See yourself doing well. Take a deep breath, step back into the space and begin. Admit to your students that you're nervous. In your role as TA, it is unlikely that you will be asked to lecture to large groups on a regular basis. However, you will need to present information to a group of 20 to 24 students as the foundation for further discussion in lab. You'll receive training on how people learn, how to develop and deliver an effective lecture, how to assess student learning, and how to evaluate your own teaching style. Moderating a discussion skillfully requires creating a context of organized spontaneity in which the leader gives the students opportunities and incentives to express themselves. This can be extremely difficult. One of the keys to facilitating a discussion is to guide its course without appearing to do so. Here are some common difficulties TAs encounter in leading discussions that relate to the problem of control and some situations to overcome them. If you habitually can't get discussions started, you first need to pay attention to the topics you're picking. They may not be broad enough, but the end result is a great deal of tension. You don't want to reject the one student, but then you don't want to alienate the rest of the class. You may want to take one or two approaches. Either you use their comments to throw the discussion back to the class. You've raised an important point. Maybe others would like to comment. Or you can acknowledge the comment and offer another outlet. Those ideas deserve a lot more time. Maybe we can discuss this after class. Or you may not be using good questioning skills, putting people on the spot or embarrassing them. If one or two students consistently monopolize the floor, there are many causes at work. If there's a lull in the discussion, relax. This doesn't mean that you've failed. Every conversation needs a chance to catch its breath. It may mean that your topic is exhausted, or it may be a pause for people to digest what they've heard. If a lull comes too frequently, though, you may need to give more attention to the types of topics you're picking. You may also be inadvertently shutting down discussion by dominating rather than facilitating. If students are only talking to you instead of each other, you're probably focusing too intently on the speaker. You can help students talk to each other by leading with your eyes, looking occasionally at others in the room. This will lead the speaker to do likewise. Remember that some students are often more hesitant to speak in class, particularly if they feel they are in the minority. If you notice that a particular group of students are dominating the discussion, or that others are habitually silent, make a point of drawing those students into the discussion gently when you see that they have something to contribute but are unwilling to do so. Alex, you seem to disagree with that opinion. How would you approach that subject? In such cases, be careful not to put students on the spot, and when a response is made, try to be especially appreciative. You may want to make a point of speaking to these students before or after class to indicate your interest in hearing their views in class more often. If you run out of material before the end of class, ask your students if there are other topics they might be interested in discussing. If not, let them go early. Don't keep them the whole session just for form's sake. Students in research-based labs get to know each other very well, and you, throughout the course of the semester. This can result in a course that is productive and fun, however, it can also lead to relaxed rules and expectations. As a TA, you must remain aware of these issues and be proactive in addressing them. Research has revealed that the top issues encountered by TAs are students come to class unprepared, students miss class, students come to class late, students eat or drink in the lab, and students challenge instructor comments or lecture. In MCDB, you'll learn strategies for overcoming these challenges, but generally keep in mind that numbers 2 through 4 are covered in the syllabus. Missing class, coming in late, and eating and drinking in the lab can adversely affect a student's final grade, and reminders of this are completely appropriate as needed. In terms of students coming to class unprepared, you may find that their peers will address this, because when others are not performing the research or uploading their data, it affects everyone. This, therefore, becomes an issue of facilitating a conversation during a lab meeting to formulate a way to address the problem as a group. If a student continues to challenge the TA's instruction, bring this to the attention of the instructor during TA meeting. The TA group will help in determining the best way to address the issue. For general classroom management, the TA should always point to safety as the primary reason for remaining attentive and not disruptive. As a rule, being decisive, proactive, and preventative will promote a positive environment for learning. You have the syllabus on your side. All lab courses in MCDB have an attendance policy. If you determine that someone's attendance is a problem, you or the instructor can send an email to remind the student of attendance policy in writing. Take attendance at the beginning of each class. Tardiness should be handled in the same way as an absence and will contribute to the student's grades. If students know that the TA has some responsibility for determining their grade, they may be more likely to attend labs led by the TA. If attendance does not directly influence their course grade, try to explain the indirect benefits of attendance. The most important thing you can do to ensure that your labs run smoothly is to be well prepared. Prior to the start of the term, your preparation should include being acquainted with the materials available in lab, so that time won't be lost during a lab looking for necessary equipment or materials, becoming familiar with procedures for getting emergency assistance, and knowing the location of the first aid kit, eye wash station, extinguishers, spill kit materials, and material safety data sheets for chemicals and reagents. Basic weekly planning for your lab session may include the following. Know exactly what the students are supposed to learn and why they have to learn these things. This may come in handy when the students start to wonder why they're doing what they're doing. When students question your organization or base of knowledge, your credibility will be damaged. Perform the entire lab exercise in advance. By going through the experiment yourself, you will be familiar with some of the stumbling blocks that your students may confront, and you will know the subtler points of the process you are demonstrating. Read and study the theory on which the lab activities are based. Your understanding of the theoretical aspect of the lab will be useful to you in handling student questions. Decide how to introduce the lab most effectively. Before students get underway with the day's lab, will they need you to demonstrate the procedures they will follow? Is a handout with written instructions in order? Do you want 2 students in the lab to demonstrate the experiment to the rest of the class? Will a 15-minute lecture about the theory and intent of the lab suffice? Your initial introduction to the lab or the day's first activity can set the tone and motivation for the rest of the lab. Prepare handouts if they're not already available, and consider how to handle unprepared students. All required supplies should be communicated clearly to the instructor. Indicate whether the supply is running low or is gone. In general, supplies are ordered with standard delivery per department policy and can take between 2 and 5 business days to arrive in the lab. Be mindful of supply levels. Encourage students to do the same. The students can take some responsibility for maintaining these supplies. A review of the purposes and procedures of the experiment at the beginning of the lab emphasizes the importance of preparation. You might deliver a brief but inspiring introduction on how the experiment relates to current developments in the discipline, or encourage the students to discuss the relevance of the experiment to the course objective. Ask for questions, clarify any ambiguities in the experimental procedure, and demonstrate special procedures now rather than interrupting the experiment later. You may also have the students create the protocol on the board before beginning the procedure. If both you and your students are well prepared, you'll be free to perform your most important role, that of giving guidance and advice. Circulate among the students and try to talk with each student at least once during the experiment. Technical and procedural matters can be handled quickly with a few words of advice or a very brief demonstration. Your primary role, however, is to help students master the steps of scientific inquiry. Recognizing and stating a problem, formulating hypotheses, collecting data, testing hypotheses, and drawing conclusions. Helping students master each step is not an easy task. You can tell students to hold the stopper between your index and middle finger while you're pouring, but telling them to think better or remember what the professor said about that yesterday will not be very effective. There is a variety of ways to help students solve problems for themselves, including repeating the explanation of the technique or procedure repeatedly throughout the semester. The use of questions is especially important. Encourage students to ask questions of each other as they go through the lab exercise. You will need to make decisions over and over again about when to ask questions, who to ask, and what to ask. Most importantly, you will need to make decisions about answering questions. Don't be too quick to give outright answers or advice. For example, if a lab member asks, "Why can't we get this to come out right?" Try asking them a series of questions which leads them to discover the reasons for themselves, rather than simply explaining why the experiment failed. Failure is an integral part of the discovery labs, so students must learn how to handle it. Of course, sometimes the reason will be relatively simple, but just as often the reason will be more substantial, a matter of timing, sequence, proportion, or interpretation. Perhaps the student has properly completed all of the steps in the exercise, but has overlooked an important step in analyzing the results, or is unable to devise the solution. It's very tempting to help students by saying, I see where you went wrong. But unless you resist the temptation, they are likely to falter at the same stage in the next assignment. Students may become frustrated if they can't get a straight answer out of you, but they will also learn more. Students in the research-based labs receive instruction related to responsible conduct in research. The labs adhere to guidelines set forth by the National Institutes of Health. As an authentic research experience, students must follow these guidelines. Data generated in these labs are often passed to sponsor labs, whose staff follow up on the findings of the courses. Research misconduct will not be tolerated. Fabrication or alteration of data is not allowed, and as a TA, you're responsible for overseeing the honest consideration and reporting of data. The University of Colorado's definition of research misconduct includes a number of categories. Research misconduct does not include honest error or differences of opinion. The following definitions were generated by University of Colorado's Office of Research Integrity. Plagiarism involves portraying another person's intellectual property as one's own. The most obvious form of plagiarism is using another's words without using quotation marks and citing the source. More subtle forms may involve appropriating ideas, concepts, or data without credit, and then changing the actual language so as to give the impression that the ideas are one's own, or providing a citation for one particular use, but then making extended future use of the original work without further citation. Fabrication involves making up data or results, notes, or other research information and recording or reporting them. Data refers to what forms of evidence are relevant to publication of research in a particular discipline. Falsification involves manipulation of research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data or results such that research is not accurately represented in the research record. Issues related to research misconduct must be communicated immediately to the instructor. Research misconduct will be treated as academic dishonesty and will be addressed according to the guidelines of the university. Safety takes on special importance when you're directly responsible for the health and well-being of 20 laboratory students. Window-shattering explosions are rare, but it's not uncommon for students to break beakers of acid, cut themselves while inserting glass tubes into rubber stoppers, or igniting a stack of lab notes with a Bunsen burner. MCDB leaves laboratory safety up to individual laboratory courses. For MCDB 1171, biosafety will be covered in great detail because students work with typhoid-causing salmonella bacteria. For 1161, 2171, and 4202, general laboratory safety will be covered. Assume that your students do not have your experience and will therefore require your concern and advice. Emphasize any safety items or procedures that are specific to the laboratory of the day. For example, if ethanol and Bunsen burners are being used at the same time, emphasize that ethanol is extremely flammable. following tips will help ensure laboratory and classroom safety. Know where the emergency exits and best evacuation routes are. Know where the closest first aid kit is, and be prepared with simple first aid procedures. Don't forget to wear gloves when working with flesh injuries. Know where the nearest telephone is and in an emergency who to contact. Keep in mind that cell phone service is often poor in the labs. Report malfunctioning equipment, even if it's only a leaky tap. Report problems to the instructor. Observe no smoking rules and regulations. This includes vaping. In the laboratory, be sure that both you and the students do the following. Wear safety glasses if required. As a general rule, any labs using chemicals require safety glasses. Do not consume food and drink in the lab. Wear closed-toe shoes, even if it's tempting to take shoes off when standing for a long period of time. Confine long hair and clothing when working with lab equipment, bacteria, and chemicals. Know the locations of fire extinguishers, safety showers, and eye washes, and know how to use them. Point them out to the students and explain how to use them. Wash your hands before leaving the lab. Develop a healthy respect for machinery and chemicals. Be alert for unsafe practices and techniques. In the event of a fire, pull the alarm and call 911. In the event of a fire alarm, direct your students to leave the building by the shortest, safest route. Give assistance to handicapped persons. Close the door after everyone has left, but do not lock it. Do not return to the building until authorized to do so. Each laboratory should develop or adopt a biosafety or operations manual that identifies the hazards that will or may be encountered, and that specifies practices and procedures designed to minimize or eliminate exposures to these hazards. Personnel should be advised of special hazards and should be required to read and follow the required practices and procedures. A scientist trained and knowledgeable in appropriate laboratory techniques, safety procedures, and hazards associated with handling infectious agents must be responsible for the conduct of work with any infectious agents or materials. This individual should consult with biosafety or other health and safety professionals with regard to risk assessment. In MCDB 1171, for example, we work closely with CU Boulder's Environmental Health and Safety. An EH&S representative will come to class to discuss biosafety with the students. Maintaining an open relationship with EH&S and other departments or agencies that oversee the safety of our research is critical to our success.